Right, that's it. You've tried it on just once too often. Right, well, don't say I haven't warned you. I've laid it on the line to you time and time again. Right, well, this is it. I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing.
Hello and welcome to Don't Mention at All. Now today we're going to look at the A-Series engine, which is a very famous little engine, and in fact you can see one under the bonnet of my Allegro, and also you'll find it in things like the Mini and, dare I say it, the Mini Moke. More of that in a moment. But first of all, let's just talk a little bit about the basic history of this, and then we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. But very simply, this engine was in production from 1952 right the way through to the end of the 90s into the early 2000s, when the last Minis were made with this type of engine fitted. By that point, of course, it was heavily modified from its original form. Now, it's a very rugged and easy to work on engine, which is partly why I bought the car, but really and truly, apart from changing the spark plugs and the air filter and maybe the oil at a push, I haven't really got a Scooby-Doo of how one of these would work. So I'm going to bring in my friend and colleague Nick, Nick the Mini Moke owner. Many of you will know him through what our day job normally is, and Nick is going to explain a little bit more about how this wonderful little engine works. So over to you, Nick, and keep it short.
Well, the A-Series is a 4-cylinder normally aspirated petrol-fueled spark ignition engine with a cast-iron block, a cast-iron head and an overhead valve arrangement. The overhead valves means that the camshaft is in the cylinder block and the valves on the top of the combustion chamber, and they're operated by push rods which take up room in the cylinder block and the cylinder head, and therefore you tend to only find 2 valves in an overhead valve arrangement, whereas if you want 4 valves in the cylinder head you have to go to an overhead camshaft engine, which comes later. Now the engine is mounted transverse on a Mini, which ordinarily would mean the gearbox would be stuck on the end. Well, you can't do that at a 4-foot wide vehicle, could you? So what you actually do is put the gearbox underneath. It also means you have to have transmission tunnel either. So therefore you've now got 20% of the vehicle's length dedicated towards the power plant, and you've got 80% of the vehicle's length dedicated towards the passengers and all their kit. What we'll also do is use the engine oil to lubricate the gears and the gearbox, but people tell us that's a bonkers idea. You can't possibly do that. It's outrageous. Oh Christ, it'll never work, will it? Guess what? An A-Series cylinder head's got Siamese ports, so that means you've got one port served 2 cylinders. And if you've got a picture of a 5-port head, you'll see you've got exhaust, inlet, inlet, exhaust, exhaust, inlet, inlet, exhaust. And Siamese ports therefore reduce the manufacturing cost and bring the overall cost of the engine down. Very common actually when you get reverse flow engines. Now, reverse flow relates to the manifold layout in which both manifolds are on the same side of the engine. Now, this promotes swell in the combustion chamber, which gives great low-end torque in an A-Series engine. It's a very common layout, and cross-flow came much later. Another advantage of having reverse flow manifolds where both on the same side is the opposite side of the engine. They're completely free for all the ancillaries. What an easy space to work in. You have a 3-branch exhaust manifold where the outer branches only have to serve 1 cylinder each, however the middle branch has to serve 2 cylinders. Of course, there's Siamese ports we just discussed, so therefore to get your gas flow correct, you make that centre branch longer, and therefore it's referred to an LCB manifold, in other words, long centre branch. Most of the A-Series engines have SU carbs on there, and SU stands for Skinner Union actually. They're later absorbed into Morris, hey guess what? Also used on the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and the Griffon engine. Hey, check that out, it's pretty good really, isn't it? Now, if you look at this particular carburettor here, it's an HF44, it stands for horizontal integral float with a 44mm choke. Now later I'll express in millimetres, but the early ones, for example, if you look at the H stands for horizontal airflow, the S stands for side draft, and the number at the end stands for the diameter of the choke in 1/8 of an inch. So for example, an HS6 would be a horizontal side draft carburettor with a 6/8 of an inch choke fitted. Alright, simple as that really. So in a Mini, which has obviously got a transverse engine, the radiator is mounted to the left-hand side of the engine bay, not at the front you'd normally expect in something like an Allegro. So the fan goes round in the normal direction as you'd expect, however the pitch of the blades is reversed completely opposite way round. So what actually happens is the air goes through the front grille of the car over the engine, is then pushed out through the radiator, which is why you can't actually put an Allegro fan onto a Mini, because that would just be silly, wouldn't it? They could talk about the A-Series engine all day, but Steve needs his chance, of course, but what a great engine. This thing is absolutely legend. There are more A-Series specialists out there than any other engine on the market whatsoever. The specialist parts market is vast. It's gone from 800cc up to 1380. It's also been turbocharged. You can find books on just how to tune this engine, over 500 pages long, just on tuning the A-Series engine. Why wouldn't you want one? Over to you, Steve.
Well, thanks, Nick. That was a really good explanation about the A-Series and how it works. And now let's talk a little bit about history again. The A-Series engine, quite simply, I think is one of the most important car engines ever made. And it also went into other things as well as cars. So you probably find them in things like river boats. You'll probably find them in generators, They powered all sorts of vehicles really, from things like the Morris Minor, taking the district nurse out on her rounds, to the Austin A30 and A35. Lots of people learnt to drive in those. The Mini, the 1100 and 1300 models, which were the cornerstone of British Motor Company in the sort of mid to late 60s. Bestseller. It really was like a sort of Ford Focus of its day. And unfortunately, that was probably the last time that British Leyland actually had a winning car on its hands in terms of a non-Mini product. Engine went into things like the Metro, obviously the original Mini in various different types, the Mini Moke, of course we've just seen one of those, and also rally cars, race cars, fire engines, police cars, all sorts of things used A-series engines. Maybe not a fire engine as such, but a small fire engine for things like factories. Morris Motors had a lovely little Morris Minor fire engine. If you ever go to Gaydon, you'll see that. Anyway, there you go. That's the A-series engine for you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Nick and I obviously at the moment can't really talk about what we normally talk about, so we're talking about our own cars. But those of you that know us, we hope to see you soon. Those of you that don't, hopefully we'll see you one day. And just stay safe, keep the car on the drive, and see you when it's all over. Don't mention the tour.